So like you, I don't know how to work this camera situation. So I want to get it situated to where y'all can see the pictures too. There's some good pictures on it. But until the end, bear with me. And we well over a minute, so I'm gonna dive straight in. This is a section of the book. It's called Uncovering the Secrets of the Past. It reads, there was a great excitement in Europe. Let me cut this music because I ain't feeling it right now. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna stop that. Boom. There was a great excitement in Europe when the conqueror of the Aztecs, Hernan Cortez, sent a consignment of gold, featherwork, and other rare treasures from Mesoamerica to the court of Charles V. The German artist Albrecht Dürer, who viewed the collection of objects, wrote in his journal, I have seen nothing that has so thrilled my heart as these artifacts, for I saw them in for I saw in them strange and wonderfully worked objects and marveled at the subtle genius of men in far off lands. So long story short, Hernan Cortez, a Spanish conquistador or explorer, you feel me? He sent some things from Mesoamerica, what they had discovered when they went there. He sent it to the courts of Charles V. And it says, the German artist Albrecht Dürer, he was impressed with the work that these people was doing. Long story short, it say Europeans had a tantalizing introduction to the subtle genius of Mesoamerican civilization. Almost 5 centuries after Dürer wrote these words, and following more than a century of excavations and interpretations, today we know much more about ancient Mesoamerican civilization. Weather and land conditions often did not favor the survival of early remains. Local practice before the conquest meant that much of Mesoamerican mythology and history was transmitted orally from generation to generation and never written down. But the major part of the blame for the paucity of surviving remains must be shouldered by the Spanish conquerors themselves. After they had captured Tenochtitlan, a great city during the times of the Mayans and the Aztecs, in 1521, and tearing down buildings using the materials called New Spain. So a lot of the destruction, what was caused to the ancient artifacts in the history, why it can't be recovered is because the Spanish, what's it called? The Spanish conquistador, they came and they destroyed it as they was pillaging and, doing what they do. And they took a lot of the resources for themselves to build up their own settlements and, get their feet on the ground in a new land that wasn't theirs. But it's a fragments of history. The Spanish missionaries who arrived in Maya lands after the conquest of Tenochtitlan were responsible for burning many of the locals' bark paper books, because that's what they was using. They was using bark paper books. I forgot. Yeah, it's called a codice. The bark paper books or codices, one of the most enthusiastic of these was Bishop Diego de Landa, author of Report of Things in Yucatan, who wrote, these people used certain letters with which they wrote in their books about ancient subjects. We found many books written with these letters, and since they held nothing that was not falsehood and the work of the evil one, we burned them all. Sound like they're trying to hide something. I wonder what was in these codices or these bark paper books. They talking about the letters that they seen. That could have been Hebrew characters, and they want to cover up the fact it could be that, because I didn't heard say in these places that, certain findings, archaeological excavations, you feel me, where they finding Hebrew characters and Hebrew historical artifacts in these places. Esau don't want that info to come out. Not back then and not now. But I can't prove that in this case. So it say they seen the letters, they deemed it false, and that it was the work of the evil one, so they burned it. So they destroyed it, the codices. It say, as far as we know, only 4 Maya codices survived the attentions of the monks. 3 of these codices are now known after the names of the European cities in which they are kept. So, they came and totally destroyed and stole their things. It said the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices, while the 4th, the Grolier Codex, is in North America. They contain many images of Maya deities, as well as information used by priests for divining the future, timing sacred rituals, and monitoring what it say. It say they contain many images of Maya deities, as well as information used by priests for divining the future, timing sacred rituals, and monitoring the movements of Venus and the eclipses of the sun and moon. So that's what's contained in these codices, or these bark paper books that were stolen from the Mayans. It says the Popol Vuh. Other surviving accounts of Maya history and mythology were written down after the conquest. The Popol Vuh, or the Book of Advice, was a sacred text of the Quiche, a group of southern Maya inhabiting highland Guatemala. It survived for posterity through a combination of Quiche determination and good fortune. The original book in Maya hieroglyphs was secretly translated into the Roman alphabet by members of the Quiche nobility in the mid-1500s. This was part of an attempt to preserve the book at a time when the Spaniards, who had conquered the region in 1523 through 24, were seeking to exterminate native culture. So they came and sacked and pillaged, but something was in this book of advice, also known as the Popol Vuh, that these people wanted to preserve this book, even though they was destroying other things. So I don't know what's in there, but it's called the Book of Advice. It say we're seeking to exterminate native culture. The manuscript was not found until later in the century, by which time some members of the Catholic Church had begun to see some merit in recording and preserving accounts of ancient Mesoamerican culture and history, and so allowed it to be preserved. This version was discovered in 1703 by Francisco Ximenez, a Franciscan friar who could read Quiche and who was therefore able to translate the text into Spanish. It says native histories. 2 other native histories survive. The first, the Annals of the Kaqchikals, contains entries up to 1604 and describes the history of the Kaqchikals, neighbors of the Quiche, from mythical beginnings onwards. Like the Popol Vuh, it was first transcribed into the Roman alphabet in the 1500s. The second, the Books of Chilam Balam, contains a mixture of prophecy and history myth of the Maya of Yucatan. These accounts were kept from the early 16th century onwards, but were rewritten with additions until the 19th century. They take their name from a Maya seer who is said to have predicted the coming of bearded men of the East who would bring violence and force the Maya to speak another language. Both these sources give eyewitness accounts of the Spanish conquest and the many changes that followed it. So they got a history of a history that they was keeping up. Esau got a hold of it right now. They ain't letting that come out to the public. They keeping that hidden away. It's saying Aztec history and mythology. Most of the written evidence we have of Aztec customs, beliefs, history, and mythology was recorded after the conquest. In manuscript books or codices, excuse, if you don't know what the conquest is, I believe it's the when the Spaniards took over that land. I believe that's all that's going into for the most part. It's saying manuscript books or codices written by young natives educated in Spanish schools and in reports written by the Spanish chroniclers based on what they saw and heard from locals. An important example is the Codex Mendoza, commissioned in 1525 by the first Spanish viceroy, Don Antonio de Mendoza. It contains an account of the growth of the Aztec Empire, illustrated and written by native Mesoamericans, based on older pictorial records. The movements of the Mexica/Aztec, so apparently the Aztecs was also known as the Mexica. It say the movements of the Mexica/Aztec and other tribal groups prior to the establishment of Tenochtitlan, which was a major city, are described in 16th century manuscripts such as the Codex Aubin, and the Codex Zolotl, and also in the 17th century history recorded by Fernando de Alva Ichilizochitl. I'm gonna repeat that, but that's the man's name. All were based on oral histories and earlier codices, now lost. Among the Spanish chroniclers, accounts is Salakia. Among the Spanish chroniclers' accounts is Friar Bernardino de Sahagún Compendius, 12-volume general history of the things of New Spain. So this man got a 12-volume book titled General History of the Things of New Spain, and it was completed in 1569. It say, his fellow churchman Diego Duran compiled both the history of the Indies of New Spain and the Book of the Gods and Rites and the Ancient Calendar. So I believe these is Spaniards. These are so-called Spaniards, and they making literature or writings about the things they came across after the conquest when they took these people's land. So it's a first-hand accounts of the conquest itself survive in the letters written by Hernan Cortez to Charles V. So that's a first-hand account of the conquest can be found in letters written from Hernan Cortez to Charles V. You see that? And in the true history of the conquest of New Spain, written by Bernal Diaz de Castillo, a member of Cortez's force. So that's another source where you can go to get first-hand accounts of the conquest and how it went down, and what they found, or it might be worth looking into. Maybe it's say rewriting the past, because they're gonna do that. Say scholars treat all the surviving written evidence with caution, as they should, as many accounts blend history and mythology in a dense combination that is difficult to interpret, not least because it is full of repetitions and contradictions. A good example is that of the Aztecs' treatment of Tula, which combines knowledge handed down by oral tradition of the historical city, which flourished between 950 AD and 1150 AD, with the myth of Toyan, or the place of the reeds, home to wondrous craftsmen where the god Quetzalcoatl ruled in the guise of the prince Topolitzin. So I don't quite know what they're saying. Like, I believe they're saying that he ruled as this person, Prince Topolitzin. I'm not sure. That's something to look into as well. We're gonna get more in depth as the time go on, but I think it's just it make a good read regardless. You know, you also got to study to show yourself approved, so that's something for you to go look into. You might look into it after this. In general, Mesoamerican peoples look to the past for justification of the present. The Aztecs, for example, rewrote their own history to establish that their destiny was to dominate other peoples and expand their own territories. That's crazy. The Aztecs often presented events or themes that were common to many cultures as unique historical happenings. The Aztecs claimed they found their origin in the place of the seven caves, but this origin was common to the beliefs of many Mesoamerican groups. Yet the Mesoamericans themselves viewed these accounts as history, even though the narratives contain non-sequential episodes and metaphorical accounts of events. Because of the Mesoamericans' willingness to because of the Mesoamericans' willingness to blend fact with what the modern mind would class as myth and historical accounts, we know nothing for certain of events that took place more than 400 years before the conquest. All scholars can do in the circumstances is to gauge the meaning of surviving buildings and ruins in the light of the latest knowledge. So they say because these people mix so much uh, mythology with a history, it's hard for them to determine reality from mythology when they going into these people's history. So, weigh that in the balance. We can see that they believed a lot of, they was off into a lot of idolatry. You feel me? So I kind of, it is what it is. It's say many carved inscriptions survive in Maya lands, notably on stelae, stone columns set up during the classic period in the 3rd to 9th centuries AD. Okay. They bear portraits of the holy kings of Maya city-states and commemorate the rulers' ascensions and jubilees. Battle victories and important religious sacrifices, which sometimes included the humiliation and slaughter of a rival king. One stela, erected in honor of King Coac Sky in Carigua, southeastern Guatemala, is 10 meters or 33 feet tall and weighs 10 tons. So they got giant stone columns, if you will, with portraits and kind of like a I'm gonna call it a day. With that, appreciate y'all for joining. Kahala Yahweh Bahashem, Mashayak Yahweh Shah. You have a blessed Shabbat if you're keeping it today. And see you next time. Rakatah. Shalom, melodic tunes. All praise Yasharallah. House of Learning. Damn, my audio was gone. Never. That's all bad. But we gonna persevere, man. I'm gonna go back and look over this. Appreciate y'all joining. Lord willing, we can get more in depth as the time go. But I'm gonna call it a day, man. I gotta get